Assalamu alaikum viewers. Here is Nabila Simab, and today this is going to be a series of lectures on the three philosophers Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and J.J. Rousseau, and we are going to discuss the theory of social contract by each one of these philosophers. So let's get going. Before discussing the theories, the social contract theory by each one of those philosophers, we are going to look at the general concept of the social contract theory. Like, what is this theory? Actually, the social contract theory is about how the state originated, how the institution of state came into being. And according to the social contract theory, there has been certain stages of evolution of stage, the way the state came into being. Now there are three stages. First of all, the state of nature, and then the social contract, and then comes the state. Now, regarding the state of nature, it was a period in human history in the very early stages when there were no human imposed laws. There were just the natural laws which dictated the life of human being, and humans have certain natural rights: the freedom and liberty, the absolute freedom and liberty, and the right to self-preservation, self-defense, of course. The state of all of the rights, if we combine into the one word, it was just about the natural power of human being. This was the uh, you know uh, the natural right of human beings. And regarding the state of nature, there are two conceptions: that whether the state of nature was pre-social or pre-political. Now we will look at how which philosophers promulgated the concept of the pre-social state of nature, and which ones about the pre-political. Regarding the pre-social, what is the pre-social state of nature? Was that it was the state of nature was the period of time of human history when there was no society, there was no concept of society. Kind of people were isolated. And in case of the pre-political state of nature, when it was a time when there was a society, people used to live in society, but there were no political organizations, and of course no political institutions, and there was no state. So it was pre-political. So then, compelled by the lawlessness, the insecurities, the inconveniences of the state of nature, people were compelled to, come into a voluntary association, the mutual association, and come into a contract. And according to this social contract, the people gave up all of their natural power and to the community, and and in return of that, the community will protect the human beings themselves, and also their property, their belongings. And as a result of this social contract, there were certain social responsibilities and duties that were imposed on the people, and in return of that, they were granted social rights. As a result of this social contract, the state came into being. Now we will look at the first philosopher who expounded and promulgated this theory of social contract. He was Thomas Hobbes. Now, Thomas Hobbes was an Englishman, and during his lifetime, there was a chaotic state. There was this civil war going on in his country, and therefore he was so eager to bring the peace and order in the society, to restore the peace and order in the society, that he advocated an absolute monarchy. He advocated a governmental setup in which there would be an establishment of strong and absolute government, absolute power, which will maintain the law and order situation in the country. And we find this social contract theory of Thomas Hobbes in his famous book Leviathan. And we are going to discuss the state of nature, the contract, the Hobbes theory of sovereignty, and also we will see and criticize his theory and what were the defects in his theory. Now, Thomas Hobbes started his theory of social contract with state of nature, explaining the state of nature from the very first stage of the evolution of state. according to the framework of the social contract theory, as we have seen earlier. Now, according to Thomas Hobbes, he has presented a dismal picture of the human being. First of all, he told us about what was this nature of the human being there when he lived in the state of nature. So, according to him, the man was selfish, he was self seeking, he lacked pity and compassion, he found no relief in the company of his fellows, and all of his actions, the sole motive behind all of his actions were to achieve his own interests, his own desires, to achieve his own desires, even at the cost of the interests of his fellow beings, because he was savage and aggressive, and he was self-seeking and selfish. He was cunning, and he was a strong man. And here we can see the pictures that how savage were the human beings there then in the state of nature. So we now get the idea that it was pre-social state of nature, because there was no society. Human beings did not live in society. And after discussing the nature of the human beings, Thobbes told us about the state of nature there. It was, it is the famous quotation of Thomas Hobbes that the life in the state of nature was solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, because there was always this danger of and fear of death. There was no security to human beings. It was a state of struggle of all against all. Every man was enemy of every other, and it was continuous and perpetual strife. There were the laws of nature, and the laws of nature are like to seek peace and to attain whatever you want to. Now, because of all of this state of nature, there was no security to the life and property of the human beings. There was this fear of sudden deaths and conflicts and war. There was an ongoing state of war. All these reasons compelled the man to come into a social contract to form a civilized society, and at the end of this day to form a state. So this is how his concept of the state of nature was. Regarding the contract, now what was the contract? The contract was that the human beings came into such a contract where they surrendered completely and unconditionally all of their natural powers and their natural rights to one man or to the assembly of men, and to whom they surrendered all of their rights unconditionally would become the sovereign. And the sovereign had the absolute power and authority. He was the absolute sovereign, and the sovereignty as expounded by him, by Thomas Hobbes, was inalienable, it was indivisible. Now the contract was among the individuals, and it was not a contract between the sovereign and the subjects. No, it was just the contract among the individuals who gave up their natural rights to the sovereign. So it was therefore not a governmental contract. And whatever the sovereign does, whatever the ruler does, he was free to do, and in no way the contract was going to be affected and violated, because it was not even the contract between sovereign and subjects. It was just the contract between the individuals who gave up all of their natural rights to the sovereign. Now, what was the Hobbes theory of sovereignty? If we dive deep into this one, it was that it was theory of absolute sovereignty. It was theory of legal sovereignty. And what is the concept of let's talk about the absolute sovereignty first, that how was it going to be the absolute sovereignty? Because the sovereign power was absolute because it was not held on condition. As I have mentioned earlier, that people came into contract unconditionally, so there was no condition, so therefore the sovereign's power was absolute. And even the sovereign was not a party to the contract, as I have mentioned earlier, that it was not the contract between the sovereign and the subjects. So the sovereign had the absolute majority, which was indivisible, inalienable. Theory of legal sovereignty was according to the theory of legal sovereignty, even if you are familiar with the concept of the legal sovereignty, it is just that the person or the assembly which has the absolute power to make laws. And here, Thomas Hobbes expounded this theory of legal sovereignty, that the sovereign will have the limitless power to make laws for the people. It won't include the consent of the people. It will just impose the laws on the people. The sovereign himself will decide what is right, what is wrong, what is justice, what is unjust, and he will decide what kind of doctrines even should be taught to the people. So he's all in all. He is the sovereign. He has absolute power. So, criticism. Now, John Locke has absolutely put it that Hobbes' theory was just a bold defense of absolute monarchy. He skillfully turned upside down this theory of social contract, because the essence of the theory of social contract, because it's a contract, it was the essence of this theory was free consent and the voluntary association among the people. But Thomas Hobbes turned it into a theory of absolute power and unconditional obedience to the sovereign. So Thomas Hobbes is regarded as the philosopher of discipline, because he was so eager to bring this peace and social and law and order situation in the country that he even did not abstain from advocating absolute despotism, absolute monarchy, where the sovereign would have the absolute powers. So it was his theory was all about giving powers to the sovereign and justifying the absolute monarchy. The facts. So there are certain facts that, first of all, that fear cannot alone be the basis of the state. Regarding this, as you know, Thomas Hobbes has put a psychological basis of fear as the basis of the origin of the state, because there was this fear of death, this fear of death and the insecurity of the people's life, and that is the only reason, sole reason actually. That is the sole reason why the people came into the social contract, because this reason is not enough actually, because this is not even our common sense does not accept this, because according to Hobbes, the people who were so aggressive, who were strong and cunning, how can they lay their necks under the heel of a monarch, a person who will have absolute authority over them? It's just like, how can the cats agree to agree that owing to their mutual fear they should be led by a lion? It's just like the cats are feared from each other, and they will allow a lion to rule them in order to secure themselves. This is insane. The second one is this: his analysis of human nature is unsound. As we have seen that in his concept of the state of nature, he has told us about the psychology of human nature, that humans are self-seeking, they don't have pity and compassion, they are selfish, brutish, and savage and aggressive. It's not all true, because we know that love and compassion are natural to human beings. Human is a social creature. He loves to being surrounded by his fellow beings. And also, even if the people were so aggressive and self-seeking, then how over a night they changed as a result of the social contract, how they became saints, because such kind of the transformation of social and psychological transformation takes lifelong training and a lot more time to bring such change in the human nature. And so we can also infer that the social contract of as expounded by Hobbes was not a single contract. It was multiple ones. It was it expanded over a larger period of time, over ages. But even if so, this is the case, then it is not even the social contract, man. It's just the laborious evolution, the social evolution of human beings. And then the next one is that he Hobbes twisted the meaning of contract, because the contract is always bilateral. It's never unilateral. And here, what Hobbes has told us is that it was the contract between the individuals. It was not the contract between the sovereign and the subject. How can it be that the contract was unilateral? It was all because Hobbes wanted his sovereign to have the absolute power. That is why, he made he actually kind of altered this theory and this concept of the contract. The other thing is that he had an inconsistent description of the terms of contract. At the beginning of his theory, he told us about that the men surrendered all of their natural rights to the sovereign because as a result of the social contract. But later in his theory, he tells us that no, certain rights were preserved, like self-defense and self-preservation of man were preserved, and they were not all the rights that were surrendered. So there is this inconsistency of description that we are unable to grasp the main concept, that whether all the rights were surrendered or some of them. And finally, the one-sided theory of rights and sovereignty, because Thomas Hobbes does not tell us about what rights the upcoming state should hold and should provide to the human beings, and it also kind of tells us just a glimpse of what rights in before the state were preserved. Regarding the sovereignty is that it tells us that the sovereign has the absolute power of legislating, making laws. But it's not true, because laws are actually the reflection of the people's will and people's consent, and laws are made by the people actually, and sovereign or the government is actually just here to execute the laws and not make the laws, the executive department. So the laws are really made by the people and not the sovereign. They are merely formulated by the sovereign. So what we can say at the end of the day, after all of after taking the whole concept of his theory, is that Hobbes was just his theory of sovereignty and his theory of sovereignty of laws and rights was just to make the sovereign's power absolute, which was the real purpose of his theory of social contract. And yes, one thing else is that his sovereignty concept of sovereignty was of a legal sovereignty, because he gave the sovereign all the powers to make the laws, so it was legal sovereignty. And yes, that is all about the defects of if I just summarize it by the Thomas Hobbes, it was state of nature. The life of man was solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. It was pre-social. Man was selfish, egoistic, unsympathetic. It was struggle of all against all. There were certain laws of nature, and because of the insecurity of their property and the life, the people were compelled to commit to the social contract, and the contract was surrendering all natural rights unconditionally to the sovereign, and the sovereign was not even a party to the contract, and the contract was, that's why not could not be violated, because whatever the ruler does, because sovereign was not even the party. And Hobbes' theory of sovereignty was of the legal sovereignty. Sovereign would have the whole power to make the laws, promulgate the laws, to decide, and he was absolute sovereignty. He would decide what is just, unjust. He would decide what is right and not right. Everything was under the control of the sovereign. Criticism is that philosopher of discipline. His theory was just a bold defense of absolute monarchy, and he skillfully turned upside down the theory of social contract, which was about the consent and which was about the willingness and association, and he converted this theory into unconditional obedience and kind of tyranny. And we have also looked at the facts that fear cannot be the sole basis of the state. His analysis of human nature is kind of unsound because humans are not just selfish and unsympathetic, they are loving and they are, social creatures. So he twisted the meaning of contract because if his contract was unilateral, just among the individuals, not with the sovereign. His inconsistent description of terms of contract because he did not give us a sure picture of whether the men surrendered all of their rights or preserved some of their rights, and it was one-sided theory of rights and sovereignty because he did not tell us that what rights should the state give to the people, and one-sided theory of sovereignty because the laws are actually made by the people and with the consent of the people, reflection of the people's views, and not the sovereign. Thank you so much, and uh, for the next video, for the for the theories of J.J. Rousseau and John Locke, please watch the other video.